Brad, I really like Vancouver a lot.
Oh, the Couve?
People are wildly uncomfortable when you call it that.
Like people up there?
I don't know why, man.
Wait, hang on. Is this the Vancouver version of Frisco? Am I doing that?
I think Frisco is totally acceptable. I feel
really?
like Matt Honan made Frisco happen.
Oh, when I moved out here, I was instructed never to refer to it as Frisco.
Yeah, I was too, but that was by people who I don't know if I trust anymore. So
I see. Okay, well, I guess I will retire that pet name for Vancouver.
No, it's okay. I think they call it Van City because they love Ryan Reynolds so much.
I bet.
Yeah.
Oh, is that where that? Oh, he is Canadian, isn't he?
He lives in Vancouver. I think his Twitter handle was Van City Ryan or whatever.
I think it's Van City Reynolds. I don't know why Reynolds. I know that because I've never followed him before. But anyway, did he make that up? I wondered where that came from.
No, I think that's what people call it. I think he, or at least maybe that's what Ryan Reynolds calls it. I don't know.
Oh, the Vancouver City Savings Credit Union, commonly referred to as Van City.
There you go. Yeah,
he's just a big fan of the credit union.
He loves the. I mean, look, credit union, can't fault a good credit union. No. So I just got back from Vancouver. We went to see Taylor Swift. It was fantastic, and I ate a lot of Canadian food. We went. They have. Okay, I'm American, and I didn't know about this, but apparently a lot of Commonwealth countries do Christmas markets around the holiday season.
Oh, that is a very European thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess Germans. It seems German, like a lot of German stuff.
It's quite continental. When I was on my YouTube city walking tour tear last year, saw quite a few Christmas markets in some fine European capitals.
I'm going to go and tell you, if we want to appropriate some culture from another place, we should steal Christmas markets because Christmas markets rip.
It seems like a pretty good time.
You pay a ticket and you get into this place.
Oh, I didn't know there was a paid admission. Anyway.
Well, I mean, you got to keep the riffraff out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's more that it takes a fair amount of effort to set up tents and like little stands and heaters and mulled wine stations. And like you could pay a couple bucks more and just the ticket was good indefinitely for your whole family, which was nice. And then you went in, there were like little stands with candles and hats. There were a lot of toboggans, I think is
the proper term. Yes.
Is that the proper term?
That is absolutely.
Or toques, I think is the other one.
Beanie if you're a lunatic.
Yeah. Wow. I wasn't judging, but okay. And then also an incredible food selection.
I bet.
So like there was a raclette booth where they had like the stinkiest cheese you've ever seen, like all heated up and gooey inside its rind, and then they just kind of scoop it out onto some bread and prosciutto on like a crusty roll and a prosciutto.
Man.
And then you could walk around tasting amazing cheese and smelling like foot. It was really good.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. There was a sausage roll place. I'd never had a real sausage roll before.
Wow.
I didn't have them when I've been to the UK before, and I'm going to go and tell you, like putting a giant sausage inside a piece of like, flaky pie crust. Oh, yeah. Delicious.
Yeah. That's another thing we should import. In fact, we should import the compulsory voting from Australia and sausage roll reward, if you're familiar with that phenomenon.
Wait, you get a sausage roll when you vote in Australia?
I don't know if it's compulsory. I don't know. I shouldn't say. I think voting is mandatory in Australia, or maybe it's like, but they get the national holiday, like, hey, everybody's off work to vote thing.
Oh, that's nice.
That is the tradition in Australia. When you go vote, you are provided with a sausage roll afterwards.
Man, that sounds fantastic. I bet everybody would vote. If you got a sausage roll at the end of voting, everybody would vote.
Yeah, look, maybe people should get on board with our civic platform.
Yeah. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. I'm Early Brad. Hello.
I'm Early Will.
Is this the earliest we've ever done, or pretty close?
No, when you were working at Giant Bomb still, we would do like some 6 o'clock sometimes.
Really?
I think. Yeah, we did real early because you were like, I've never podcasted this early. I was like, this is literally the only time I've ever been allowed to podcast.
That's 6 a.m.
We would do 6 a.m. fairly regularly because of Adam's schedule when he was shooting.
Okay. Sure. Oh, sure. Wow. That's that TV celebrity schedule. That's that like 4 a.m. call time.
Yeah, well, their call time would always be after dark, after the sun was up. But like, yeah, it was.
I just mean generally people that work in like TV and film, like you just hear about having to be on set or ready to go at 4 a.m, working 12-hour days type stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was like, man, I would love to be on the Today Show. And then somebody told me that they had to be in downtown in Manhattan at like 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something to get ready.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, no, I'm good. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, of course. What time are they done though? Like
10. But then they have a day of work, right?
Well, I guess so. Sure.
It's like they like at this point it's not like the old days where Brian Gumbel and Katie Couric just showed up for a few hours and drank some coffee and chatted and then went home.
That's fair.
Now, Al Roker is out. He's probably out doing the nightly news for all I know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? For those salaries, for those contracts, I think I would be fine with that for a few years.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Ryan Reynolds was at the Taylor Swift show I was at, for what it's worth. Yeah.
Did he tweet about it or something?
Yeah, everybody tweeted about it. It was I think Graham, the Graham is the landing place for most of the Swiftie organization. Although surprisingly large number of Swifties on Blue Sky, it turns out.
Yeah, actually there was an influx, wasn't there, around the time of the big exodus.
Yeah, I think the Brazilian Swifties have always been there. I think that's always been like where they landed. But
that was maybe my favorite part of the Blue Sky move, was realizing that if people remember, there was that dust up between Twitter and Brazil.
Oh yeah,
Brazil like banned Twitter nationally for a while, and I think they lifted it eventually. But it sounds like so many Brazilians went to Blue Sky in the interim that most of them just stayed.
Well, Brazil was already like one of the larger countries on Blue Sky. Even before that, there were a lot of like kind of oddly horny Brazilian guys on Blue Sky, and like Japan and Brazil were like both really large presences even before the Twitter exodus. So.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, like when I first got on there recently and looked at the feeds, like those were some of the languages that floated to the top. Like add this feed to see all posts from the Japanese cluster. I don't know what cluster is in Blue Sky terms, but
yep, that's it.
That kind of thing.
It's cluster. But yeah, so we went to the last Eras. My lovely wife got lottery tickets to the last Eras Tour show. And like, while I like a 1989 and I'm a fan of pop music, generally speaking, I never in my life expected to go to a Taylor Swift show. Mm-hmm. And it was, and we've been to a kind of lot of music over the years, but this was really unlike anything I'd ever been to in my life. Like, ever been to. Yeah, like it made it like so we saw Prince a few times in arena shows, and it was an incredible performance. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like a full body
sensory experience.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It wasn't like, so I've seen shows with a big screen with screens and like big AV and stuff like that. Like Nine Inch Nails has been doing that for a really long time. Like and I've seen shows that were loud and there was a lot going on, and I've seen shows where people do a lot of dancing and moving around the stage and stuff like that. First off, this stage is really freaking enormous. It was like to cross, so it's like it's wide and long and pokes out into the floor like 2/3 of the way across the floor. And I think this was the Vancouver, like the main municipal auditorium thing. It was basically the size of like Chase Center, like a big basketball arena. I think they play indoor football there, maybe.
Oh, they haven't actually named it after a corporation yet.
I'm going to go and tell you one of the best things about Canada is it seems like they don't name things after corporations.
Man, that sounds so nice. Much.
Yeah. Like I went to a park and it was like, this is just brought to you by the municipal park agency of Vancouver. I was like, oh, that's really nice. It's everything's just like a place.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Speaking of our civic platform.
Okay, so just to be like aside on Canada, everything was really clean. I've always kind of thought that the further north you go up the West Coast, the cleaner and nicer the cities get.
I could see. Yeah, sure.
But like everything was really clean. Everybody took a lot of pride in Vancouver. We were talking to a woman in the Christmas market who was selling candles. She's like, "Oh, you're from out of town. Let me give you some recommendations about places that I like." And she's like, "Where are you staying?" Blah, blah, blah. And she gave us like a sushi and a ramen place that we didn't end up going to the sushi place, but the ramen place was amazing. And it was like really inexpensive and it was delicious. So everybody was really like even the people working on like trash pickup in the parking lot at a Walmart were like doing a really nice job. It was nice to be someplace where people had a lot of pride in their city.
That's pleasant.
We don't get that so much here anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the stage was really long and really wide. Like when she was running from one side of the diamond part of the stage to the other, it was like a full speed run for like 8 or 10 seconds to get from one side to the other to like engage with the audience on either side of the stage.
Wow.
It was a really big stage.
Yeah. Like I saw photos of this show made a lot of news, let's say. Like headlines were everywhere of like, okay, the Eras tour has concluded. The final show has been played, blah, blah, blah. So I've seen like a fair number of like press photos of it. And it got me thinking about, you do see a giant screen in there, but it got me thinking about, that is like about as big an arena as you could imagine somebody playing in. Like, how do you project to that many people when like the actual performer is maybe not quite the size of an ant, but not too much bigger from the nosebleeds? Like I assume there are like a lot of modern innovations, in the same way that like football games, televised football games have gotten way more interesting from a like broadcast standpoint with the weird camera tricks and stuff. Like I'm kind of imagining that modern arena shows are also getting more technological in the way they kind of communicate to the audience.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff with that. They so the entirety of the stage that pokes out onto the floor was a screen as well, and also bits and pieces of it move up and down so that people on the floor and in the higher seats could see her.
Wow.
And see the band and see the dancers and stuff. They also used a ton of like really huge like props. So like the show opens, you can the first version of the tour is on Disney Plus. If you're interested in this, you can watch it. The only thing that changes between that and the back half is that the album that came out earlier this year is integrated into the show now, and it wasn't when they recorded the Disney Plus show. The SoFi tour or whatever it was. But she comes out with a lot of big props, like the fans that they walk out with, that the dancers come out with before she comes out at the beginning of the show are like 30 feet tall, it looks like. And they make this huge stage seem really small. And then she comes out and there's screens everywhere. Like they had the big Jumbotron screen that's in the middle of the arena lit up so that everybody could see. So everybody had a pretty good view. It was remarkable. They also, but before we get into the technology stuff, because there's technology stuff here, Vancouver, like a Vancouver artist or civic collective or something. There's a sign at the waterfront in Vancouver that's like a tourist destination that says, it's like a lighted sign that says Vancouver. It's down by the water and people go and take their pictures with it. And they took off the van part of the Vancouver and just changed it to Swiftcouver, and then also made similar signs with song lyrics and kind of put them all over downtown at interesting places and made like photo ops and a scavenger hunt. And what ended up happening because of that is a bunch of people were going around and trading bracelets and doing all the stuff that they do at Taylor Swift shows, but just all through downtown Vancouver over the entire weekend. And it ended up having like, it was real like ARG or PAX vibes, right? Because there were a couple of secret ones that weren't like posted anywhere. But also it was very much like when you went, like my favorite part of going to PAX was going in and setting up at the board game free play area with a game I didn't know how to play or I kind of knew how to play. And you take a little sign that said, hey, I want to play this game and I kind of know how to play it. I'm willing to learn. And then somebody would sit down and be like, oh yeah, I know this game. I'll totally, let's play. And like the whole city felt like that because like this huge number of people came in for this show. The city was really welcoming, and they also did a bunch of like art installations and cool things to show. And because it's Vancouver and because it's Canada, the signs, the lighted up signs that they made with the show lyrics are all getting repurposed now to be like Christmas signs and have holiday messages. And they're putting them in, I assume, same places, but rearranging the letters and stuff like that, which I thought was like, rather than just chucking them in the landfill as soon as the show's over, which is what, I think probably we would do here. Yeah. So, okay. So when you're in the show, when you come into the show, first thing is tickets work differently than I'd had work at a big show like this before. It's a new Ticketmaster thing, which, boo Ticketmaster.
Yeah. I mean, they're still the monopoly, right? Like they're basically, you're not going to deal with anyone but Ticketmaster for something like this, right?
I think unless you really go out of your way to not deal with them, you have to deal with Ticketmaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the fees that they charge are exorbitant, blah, blah, blah. Ticketmaster fucking sucks. We all know. The tickets are not just a QR code anymore.
Oh,
so they're like, have their QR code with a little like swiping bar across the front of it. and you have to transfer it with the app if you want to give a ticket to someone else.
Swiping bar?
It like the bar animates across the front of the QR code bit.
Huh.
And yeah.
Are you doing that in a specific in the Ticketmaster app, or is that something they control?
So you can do it in the Ticketmaster app, or you can add it to Wallet, and it will still animate in the Wallet. But it's like synced and timed, almost like a 2-factor code or something like that.
I did not realize there had been such innovations in QR code technology.
Well, so they're worried about forgeries.
Oh, sure.
And also people stealing tickets.
Yeah, so, like honestly, it's not exactly social engineering, but the potential for a QR code to just like get caught on video or to somehow get captured somewhere where like QR codes are very simple. They're just encoded text, right? Like you could
just
probably,
a picture, yeah. With
just like the right tools, you could very much lift somebody's QR code with probably a pretty small amount of incidental data.
Yeah. So they, like one of the things, like people were really worried about their tickets getting stolen because obviously their resale value on the tickets for that show were stupid. The transfer process for selling a ticket or buying a ticket from someone was that you'd list the ticket on StubHub, and then StubHub had no confirmation that you actually owned the ticket, but the penalties for selling a ticket you don't have are pretty enormous in terms of cash outlay. And then you'd have to release the ticket to the person who bought it in StubHub via an email address or a phone number, and couldn't do it until 3 days before the show. So like it was an interesting process. One of my daughter's friends was there for the same show, and they had bought aftermarket tickets, and were like, we want to be the first ones in the door, so that if we get like if the people who sold our tickets sold them twice, we want to be the ones that make sure we get in.
Yeah, right. That's pretty scary with only a 3-day window, especially if you're traveling in from out of town. Like this is somewhat similar. There's this week-long Interstellar run at IMAX going on right now. I don't know if you knew. Yeah. And I was super bummed. I didn't find out until it started, so the tickets were long gone because I would have killed to see Interstellar in an IMAX.
Oh yeah, it was really good.
But apparently, you didn't?
Yeah, I saw it in IMAX when it came out. It was incredible.
The first time it was. Yeah. But apparently, like I saw on Reddit, the San Francisco show, which the Metreon is one of the better IMAXs in the country. People were traveling in from out of town to see it here, and like the 70mm projector broke down, and they had to cancel shows.
Oh my God, that's the worst.
At the Metreon, I saw people on Reddit like I flew in from out of town to watch this movie, and they canceled my showing. Like that's rough.
Well, we met some Austrians the night of the show who had flown in from Vienna.
Wow, and they had tickets to the Vienna because she had to cancel the Vienna shows because of a terrorist thing. Wow.
So somebody threatened to attack the venue.
Wow.
And they were stoked to be there and get to see it after all. Anyway. So when you did your ticket, you walked into the show, and then somebody handed you a bracelet that was like a little nylon, like a ribbon bracelet with Taylor Swift Eras show and QR code and this big chunky plastic white box and a pull tab. And they said, hey, pull the tab when the show starts.
Not until the show starts, not just when you go in.
I think when the show starts is what is they look. The people had grabbing these things out of trash cans and handing them to every single person that walked in. Maybe not the most communicative, Brad.
Yeah.
But that thing was a tiny radio and RGB light. And it let the entire audience light up basically on command, according to the show, what was happening in the show. There was a Wired article from the start of this tour last year that explained how they did it. A company called Pixmob does it.
Okay.
And like you would be so I was sitting there and I was like, oh, there's like 3 ways they could do this, right? There some sections would light up with like hearts or stars or spirals, or there'd be stripes occasionally. And then midway through the show, I guess spoilers for the Taylor Swift Eras show tour that you can now no longer see. When she starts singing the Reputation songs, then a snake starts moving through like around the entire stadium, like a giant half section high snake.
This is effectively like a drone show, but using human beings instead.
Yeah, basically. So this Wired article explained how they did it. Basically, there's 3 ways. One is that they know they tie the band to your seat,
Right.
So they know where you're supposed to be sitting, but then that doesn't work if people move or whatever. The other is that they have a bunch of stations set up throughout the stadium to let them ID the band. The bands have IR transmitters, so they can ID each band and address them individually based on where they are.
Okay, now that's amazing. Like the keyed to seat number thing is obvious, and I assumed the only way they could do this, but like to be able to dynamically, positionally address everything is like kind of insane.
Works like Twinkly, basically.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the third way is that for K-pop shows, they can let you Bluetooth them to your phone. And it turns out the audience in Korea is more likely to engage with that. When they've tried it here, it doesn't really work very well.
I was going to say expecting an opt-in option to work collectively here is a pretty big ask.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the upshot on the Bluetoothing into the phone is you get some special stuff when you do that, which is compelling to the audience. But here, people don't bother.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I put a video. We'll link the video and the Wired article because the Wired article was interesting. There's a lot more detail in there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's like it's like such a crazy sign of the times because like the technology in the bracelet that you're talking about 25 years ago was like extreme advanced future tech, and now it's just in a disposable thing that you're going to use for 2 hours and then throw in the trash,
or make it into a Christmas ornament or something.
I mean,
it becomes a keepsake, Brad. I think,
given the dedication of the average Swiftie, I'm guessing most of those don't go in the trash. To be fair,
yeah, no, I can't imagine anybody chucked them in the trash. So it's worth mentioning. It was we were there for the last show, and there were people filling the streets around the stadium singing along because you could hear the music outside the stadium. But the people who'd been on previous nights had their bands on, and some of them were flashing even in the general vicinity because they still have a radio.
So that's why I was asking if they told you explicitly not to pull the tab until the show started, because I was wondering if it only had like 2 to 3 hours of battery life or something.
So the pro tip for Swifties was that you save the little tab that you pull out so you can jam it back in at the end of the show, so it's not flashing all night and annoying you in your hotel room.
Sure.
That seemed to be the right choice to jam it back in because we did that when we got back to the hotel room. I think you can probably pull the tab for a while. My guess is it's just like watch coin cell batteries in there. I have not taken one apart yet. I'm sure that has happened online. And then the last thing that's technology related is I'm an earplug guy at concerts because I have tinnitus and I don't like it getting worse. And
understandable.
I have used both like fancy, like the partial noise blocking ones that are supposed to reduce the overall level of all different ranges. So you get still a pretty good music experience, albeit a little bit muffled. And then for really loud shows, I've used like the kind of earplugs that people that work on the line at the airport do, that are just like the foam minus 30 decibel deals. I once went to a Jack White show that was so loud that those minus 30 decibel plugs were not good enough. And that was the loudest. I mean, it was literally louder than when I saw like Megadeth at an outdoor festival. So it was indoors. It was indoors at Bill Graham versus outdoors at like Lollapalooza or something.
You've seen Megadeth?
I saw Megadeth. It was at a festival. It doesn't count.
Wow.
Yeah. I went to a lot of festivals when I was in college, man.
Okay, fair.
So this wasn't as loud as that. This was like a peak of like 9,500 decibels, I think is what the watch said. But I used my AirPod Pros 2. Is it AirPod Pros 2 or AirPod Pro 2s?
AirPod Pro 2s, AirPods Pro 2, AirPod Pros 2. There's a lot of options.
It's like Attorneys General, right?
Yes, something like that.
Anyway, I use my AirPod Pros. And because recently the Apple got the AirPod Pro 2s specifically approved as a hearing protection device because of the active noise canceling.
Right.
And there's 3. It was a fantastic experience. I highly recommend it. It was
interesting.
It was like transformative in the way I listened to music at the live show.
Yeah, like turning them into kind of hearing aids. I mean, they're not like full. I think they're
over the counter hearing aids, hearing assistive devices.
I think like for moderate hearing loss, right? Like for like extreme hearing loss, you still need like actual custom devices. But for the hearing aid thing, like that alone was a cool development. But I never even considered the idea of using these to act as earplugs at concerts, but also better than earplugs, like to actually like enhance the experience rather, because with earplugs you're protecting yourself, but you're kind of dampening the oral experience, let's say. So
yeah, it wasn't it wasn't as so yeah, like using earplugs. I look, everybody should use earplugs if you go to live music because it's always too loud and you're going to hurt your ears. This was 3.5 hours long, and I was honestly worried about nonstop 3.5 hours long. At one point, at the end of the acoustic set, she just dives into a hole in the floor, and then like an animation plays on the floor, and then like 20 seconds later, she pops up on the other end in a different outfit. So it was incredible.
Man. Did she real quick? Did she get a significant break in the 3.5 hours, or was she just going
the whole time?
Wow.
Okay. Dude, the way she trained for this, my wife likes Taylor Swift a lot. I learned a lot about Taylor Swift as a result. The way she trained for this was to just sing the entire 3.5 hour set while she was running on her treadmill at like full speed.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I was exhausted after 3.5 hours, and I was just standing there and dancing and singing. It was nuts. Okay. So, back to the AirPods. So, you have the three modes: the noise canceling, the transparency, and the adaptive. The transparency and the adaptive do the same amount of noise reduction, of attenuation, I think is the technical term. And depends on where you are in terms of the overall noise level of the place you're in. They do more at louder levels. I think the transparency mode does a little bit less, but sounds clearer, basically. So like, at a 90 to 95, at a 90 decibel environmental noise level. This is from the Apple's support page about this feature. At a 90 decibel environmental noise level, you get 6 to 9 decibels of attenuation. So it's like a reduction by double or triple, I guess. I don't know. The math is weird. I think every 3 decibels is a halving in energy level. So at 95, it's 9 to 12 decibels. And while you're wearing them, the noise app on your watch will say, okay, this is the level of that's coming through to your ears right now. This is the level that is without them.
Oh,
when you change modes, so you see the update, so you know what you're getting and how loud it is. I don't know how accurate it is. I assume it's fairly accurate since they got approval for this. The transparency mode sounded like I didn't have anything in my ears, but just quieter. When I pulled an earplug out, it was really loud. When I put the headphone back in, it just sounded like I was at a concert.
That's cool as hell. Like I don't go to a lot of live music these days, but if I did, I think I would be looking at these just for that reason alone. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, the adaptive mode reduced the level a lot more. At the 90 decibel, it was 22 to 25 decibels of reduction. There was a little bit more distortion, but it was still, the music was really good. The weird stuff was that it would occasionally pick up somebody singing really loud behind you or beside you, and like just amplify the shit out of that instead of the music that you wanted to hear. But switching modes would usually fix that. So, and the battery lasted the whole 3.5 hours, no problem. So great. I'm taking these to every concert I go to from now on. It was freaking incredible.
That's awesome. That's very cool.
So that's it. And it's worth mentioning, I replaced the default tips on my AirPods with Comply soft foam tips because they're more comfortable. That's it.
Do those let more sound in than like a silicone would?
I would think less, but I don't know. I don't have any, because they're more material, more solid than just the kind of silicone flaps.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I don't know.
All right.
So that's Taylor. It was awesome. You should go see the Eras tour.
I'm glad. I'll get right on that. Glad y'all had fun. That's cool.
They were shooting a movie, it looked like, while we were there. So they had like people on stage that aren't normally on stage. The whole other thing about this show that I don't think people realize is that every night on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube, people were live stream. Like there were people who were live stream aggregators that would take people who were at the shows and posting stuff, like posting live feeds on TikTok or whatever, and aggregate them and post them out to the larger audiences. And like switch between cameras and the whole thing. So you could watch grainy live streams of all of these shows.
Oh, that's crazy.
Nuts.
Do individual people stream entire concerts these days? Like you see clips all the time, but is anybody just standing there streaming the entire thing? And do the artists generally just allow that?
So the artists have wildly varying feelings about this. Mm-hmm. She allowed it. And as a result, like a lot of culture, like a lot of community stuff grew up around the shows, right? Like there's chants that people shout at her at breaks in songs, and people do certain things at specific times. There's certain times they hold up their phones with the flashlights on, and there was this whole kind of community thing that happened because of the grainy live streams, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, in her case, that seems like a net positive for her kind of community audience building, but also I don't think she's hurting for revenue if a few people watch her concert for free. It's maybe different for smaller artists.
I think the next step is the grainy live streams made me want to go to the show. I think she understands the community stuff, and it honestly reminds me of like old ARGs for games, because it was like the community building around that was very similar to like the Halo 2 ARG, where people are forming communities and like finding somebody in Prague to go to the right cell phone, right payphone at the right time to answer the call and stuff like that. Like it was very supportive. Like people were sharing confetti that fell at the end in these Facebook groups and the Discords and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very wholesome thing.
That's cool. I'm glad you guys had fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Well, while you were up there doing that.
Yeah. It sounds like you were having a lot of fun too.
I was doing some shucking.
Oh boy. It's oyster season here in San Francisco.
Yep, that's right. Oh God. Right. Okay. Well, shucking corn is what I had always thought of as the metaphor for this, but I guess oysters work just as well. I never considered that.
You don't need a tool to shuck corn. You need a tool to shuck oysters.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that's more applicable. Definitely. Yeah, I think we've talked about this a little bit here and there, but I don't know that we've ever just done like a little primer on hard drive shucking before.
It's worth doing because it's a little tricky.
Yeah, and this is my first time running into the really tricky part actually, and so it's all fresh in my mind. So I figured we just kind of run through some stuff here.
I love it.
Real quick, because the shucking was good on Black Friday, or the deals were.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, the reason you do this is that typically external like enclosures and hard drives, full-size hard drives and USB enclosures are typically a lot cheaper than a comparable like NAS class drive.
Yes.
So if like you're filling out a NAS to store stuff that's not super essential, or you have a lot of redundancy built into your NAS setup or something like that, it's totally acceptable to buy a bunch of these cheap drives and then pop the enclosures open and lift the drive out of them.
Yeah,
just knowing that they're going to fail at a higher rate than the NAS drives will, but probably not in a way that you notice.
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of people talking about them failing rapidly, but yeah, that is the definition of shucking, just harvesting a 3.5-inch hard drive out of a commercial retail off the shelf USB enclosure. It seems like, in my experience, it's mostly a Western Digital phenomenon. I tried to find instances of people shucking Seagates, and I saw a few references to the Backup Plus line from Seagate, but it seems 90% very predominantly centered on the Western Digital brands. I've got multiple brands that I've gotten over time. I've got several Western Digital Elements is the ones I had mostly run into. There's also the Western Digital My Book line. Yep. And then the ones I got over Black Friday, there was a killer deal on the Western Digital Easy Store, which it'll research turns out to just be a Best Buy exclusive brand or product
label. Yeah.
The enclosure is slightly different, but it's basically the same deal. I don't know why Best Buy gets its own line, but anyway, they do. But those are the brands to look for. Like you said, the main reason it's cheaper. But kind of a corollary to that I actually was just looking this up because I didn't realize this. You kind of can't get drives this size in a lot of the common cost-effective hard drive lines. Like Western Digital Blue only goes up to 8 terabytes, for example.
Yeah.
Which I did not realize. Like their kind of modest, like mainstream middle of the road hard drive just does not go up into the high teens, 20 terabytes. You're getting into NAS and data center hard drives typically to get capacities like that,
which means you're paying enormous prices to get the bigger drives.
Yes. So that's the main pro. It's way cheaper for the price to terabyte ratio. That's what you're looking for here. The thing to worry about with shucking is the price to terabyte ratio. Because they used to be price to gigabyte, but now we're firmly in the terabyte era. Did you know that the roadmaps are predicting 100 terabyte hard drives by the end of the decade? Did you know that?
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I thought we hit a couple of walls along the way and it was slowing down.
That was like beginning of this decade. Seagate and Western Digital were predicting that. I don't know if that may slow down still, but that was the roadmap. Anyway, it's just simple math. You're just dividing the cost of the hard drive by the number of terabytes. My sense is that like $16 a terabyte right now is a good price.
That seems right.
Like it's fuzzy. It goes back and forth depending on what's available, but I think that's like something to shoot for probably. My biggest reference for this, and I think we've probably mentioned this site before, is Shuckstop.
You mean shucks.top?
Yes, shucks.top. We'll put it in the show notes. They only track Western Digital drives. Like case in point, I think it's mostly it's not a lot of Seagate being used for this stuff, although you can.
I think traditionally in the old days, at least, Seagate drives had more problems being used outside the enclosure.
That might be true. I don't know.
But also people tend to like Western Digital drives for NAS use these days for some reason.
Yeah. Yes. Shuckstop does like almost a heat map, like a color coded prices are good if they're blue, like bad if they're red kind of thing.
And they put medals on like the all-time prices and the year best and stuff like that.
That was what got me to jump on the 20 terabyte Easy Store, but a $16 a terabyte is blue on there, so that's currently considered pretty good. The 20 terabytes I got were $12.50 a terabyte. So
holy crap, Brad!
Like historic all-time low for a 20 terabyte drive.
That is crazy.
It was pretty good. So like I said, the pro is you were getting a bigger drive for way cheaper than if you bought one of those high-end lines off the shelf. The cons of this are the warranties are shorter, and you don't know what you're going to get inside.
Also, once you take it out of the shell, you're going to have a hard time with the warranty, probably, is my experience.
Yeah, we'll get to disassembly in a minute, but I have read people saying if you're very gentle and reassemble it properly, you can still RMA it and they won't say anything.
Okay.
But that is situational, and you would definitely have to make sure you don't like break anything on the enclosure, because then they would know. But like I said, you don't know what kind of drive you're going to get. Western Digital does the white label thing where the drive inside has just a white label with all the serial numbers and model numbers and blah, blah, blah on it. People out there will match those numbers up to different things, like looking in product databases and data sheets to try to kind of divine what kind of drive you have gotten. You know, it's like, these 20 terabytes are UltraStar drives, which are, I think, their data center line. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, these are like Red Pros in here.
Wow.
But even that said, like, this is where you get into the real fuzzy, like Reddit scuttlebutt or, Serve the Home forums, because you see people discussing this stuff all the time. There's a lot of like speculation or like, oh, I know a guy in the storage industry or whatever that says that like these drives can be of kind of, I don't know if dubious origin is the right way to put it, but it's like they might be new old stock, or they might be like drives that were not binned as well as the ones that went into the actual high-end retail channel. The craziest stuff I've seen, and this is all unverified, but I've seen it suggested that like sometimes you'll get a drive that's actually physically a bigger capacity than what it said on the box, and they like firmware flashed it to be a smaller drive because it had too many bad sectors, and they like worked around the bad sectors. That's, again, I don't know if that's actually legit. I've also seen people say that some of them are firmware performance limited because they don't. That's
weird.
Because basically the stance there would be like, hey, if you want the full speed of these 7,200 RPM drives, you're going to pay for the Red Pro or the data center price. So like some people will say, oh, the white label drives are 30% slower by firmware limitation. But again, this is all like unverified stuff, but it is something to be aware of if you're going this route.
But also the point of this is that if you're doing deep storage or even like media serving, you don't need super high performant drives for this, right? You just need something that holds data and spins and is reliable.
Yeah. And if you're aware of these possibilities, you should be building redundancy in anyway.
Yeah.
You should be doing mirrors or a parity setup in RAID and
ButterFS or something
or ZFS and also have backups. Like RAID is not backup. Like we've been over this, Even the best hard drive on the market should not be entrusted with your data solely. So those are all things to know, but also things you can absolutely work around.
Cool.
Okay. So this time I've always gotten the enclosures open fine, but sometimes it's a pretty fiddly process. It's always like every product on the market, it's the plastic seam. Everything is like clipped together with internal locking mechanisms. Nothing just has screws that you can unscrew and lift out anymore.
Were these more like the Elements or more like the MyBooks? I find the Elements are pretty easy to get open and the MyBooks are a pain.
I don't think I've ever gotten a MyBook before. I think all of mine previously have been Elements. These Easy Stores are quite similar to the Elements in the process of getting them open.
Yeah, it's like a U-shaped sleeve that you kind of just pop an edge off of and then you can get in there.
Yeah. So on the TrueNAS forums of all places, I just happened to Google this time, and I found what I consider now to be the ultimate guide, like the Bible on getting hard drive enclosures open, or maybe anything. Well, especially hard drive enclosures. Something like a dual shock or dual sense is still a taller order for separating the enclosure on. But this TrueNAS guide, which I will link, calls for a dozen Fender guitar picks.
Okay.
I went and bought a little baggie of Fender 351s, which is what this person recommends, because they're like the exact right width and smoothness, so you don't like mark up the enclosure in case you want to RMA for $4.
And they're right bendiness too, right?
Yeah, they're flexible, they're strong, and it's just a process of inserting the guitar picks around the right points in the seam, and then sticking like 3 of them stacked together in the front to kind of pop the front open, and at that point it just slides right off. Like I could not believe how fast and easy it was. It came off perfectly. It didn't, because I've broken tabs on my previous Shucks pretty consistently. You know, they still it's fine, but
yeah,
it is easy to break little plastic tabs off. These came off like butter. Took like 30 seconds per drive to get it open. Like I could not believe how easy it was.
Boy,
so
that's really good. I always use spudgers for these before.
Yeah.
Spudgers are like little nylon sticks that have pointy and wedgy ends.
Yeah, this guide explicitly said, hey, this guitar pick method works better than spudgers, which are easier to break things or mark the enclosure up or whatever. So anyway, I highly recommend this guide. Get yourself a little baggie of 351s.
Yeah, this is amazing. I for what it's worth, we used guitar picks to do iPad screen removals.
Oh, okay.
Because you get them under there, and anyway.
Yeah, and then the Fenders are also just high quality, like very obviously like good, thick, quality plastic that's not going to scratch or break easily. Cool. I had saved my parts on my old Shucks. This thing, I kind of took the cue from this guide to go further and put the parts for each Shuck in a little baggie and store that inside the enclosure. Because previously I'd just thrown all the screws and the USB interface board and all that stuff back in the enclosure loose.
Yeah, you'll figure it out.
Can kind of run the risk of closing the enclosure back up on the board or breaking something that you would need to make it portable again. To be clear, a lot of people just toss the enclosures when they're done shucking because they have no intention of ever using them again. I keep them all for RMA purposes, and also like you might want to turn that drive back into a portable at some point.
I just keep one usually for each type of drive I have.
Yeah, I wonder if they are compatible with different sizes. I can't imagine they're going to the trouble of making the USB controller in each thing only accept the drive it came with, but I don't know. Have you ever tried it?
I've never had one of these drives fail.
Okay.
So
yeah, in my case, like I don't trust RMA. I've gotten refurbished RMA drive replacements back that then went on to fail pretty quickly. So I'm not really likely to RMA a drive and ever trust it again. But it's more, in my case, it's more, and we'll get. I just did this. We'll get to it, but it's more for being able to use it as a portable again later.
Yeah, it's funny. Once the drive has lived in the NAS for more than like 2 years, I'm probably not going to use it for anything else.
Yeah. Remember what I said? I bought a bunch of stuff for backups and then never actually did the backups.
Yeah, but you had sometimes it's the thought that counts, Brad.
Let's say these old drives are very lightly used, so I'm fine putting them back into portable service again.
Fair.
But anyway, yeah, like putting all your parts in a little baggie in the enclosure if you're going to save all that stuff is a good idea there.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, actually, since we're talking about disassembly, I'll just get to it now. The 20 terabytes are replacing a couple of old 10 terabyte Shucks from 5-6 years ago.
Double storage.
So getting those elements drives back together in the enclosure and figuring out the geometric puzzle of how the rubber blocks went back into the enclosure was a 30-45 minute challenge, because there are not a lot of reassembly guides out there. And so you have to really just figure out how everything fits together.
Well, and then the weird thing is also there's like weird light pipes that move lights from the circuit board out to the flashy light on the front of the drive and all sorts of other weird stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was pretty frustrating, but then satisfying once I finished it to actually get the drive back together. And those 10 terabytes work fine as portables again now.
So the thing I want to talk about, though, is that you had the 3.3 volt issue, which has never happened to me yet.
Really?
No
kidding.
I've never had it.
So I think it really is the first time for me as well. And I think it really depends on what you're putting your shucked drive into. Although it's very inconsistent even from drive to drive. I know Jeff Gersman from Giant Bomb has shucked quite a few, and I think he's run into the 3.3 volt quite a bit, but I think he puts all his drives in PCs, or has until recently. And so are you putting shuck drives into, like, for example, a Synology is what you're talking about?
So I'm putting shuck drives. Let's see. The current shuck drives are in a Synology. previously I put them in a free NAS machine, but I might have bought NAS drives still then. I can't remember.
Okay.
Because the NAS drives didn't start getting really expensive until like the last 5 years.
Yeah, when the capacities really started soaring is when you started getting up into like $400, $350 to $400 drives, which is pretty rough. So what we're talking about here is kind of known as the 3.3 volt issue. And I think it might just be a Western Digital thing. I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, you just don't see a lot of Seagate shucks in general, so I can't verify.
Yeah, my understanding is a Western Digital thing to keep people from doing exactly the thing that we're doing.
Yes. I will say one thing I forgot to mention real quick. The one of the Seagate shucks I did find somebody showing pictures of. They got a branded Iron Wolf drive out of their Seagate shuck, which is
the surveillance ones, right?
No, that's their NAS drive. That's the equivalent of the Red Pro for Western Digital. So, but again, that could be old stock or something. You still don't know that even just because it's got a retail label on it, if it's actually great or not. Anyway, okay. So what will happen with a fair number of the Western Digital drives that you shuck, and again, it sounds like this depends on what kind of power supply you're hooking them up to, is if there is a 3.3 volt pin on the power connector on a SATA drive, it's part of the SATA connector spec. And if the drive has this problem, which they don't all have, but if it does have this problem and it's getting power on the 3.3 volt pin, it will just refuse to spin up when you turn your computer on.
Oh, wow.
And this is the first time I've run into this, and I don't know what the distinction is here. I have every drive I've ever shucked until this time has gone into this little 4-bay USB enclosure I have that was like $100. And every drive has worked. Like I've never had this problem before. And I've also talked to other people who have never had a shucked drive not work in an external bay. So I'm thinking this might be a PC power supply problem only, or pretty close to it.
Well, okay. So while you were talking, I did a little quick research. The Synology provides the 3.3 volts on the drive rails. Synologies have for a long time, apparently, as of 6 years ago.
Okay.
So that's why they work there without any problem. It might just be that it's a PC power supply. Yeah.
That's kind of the gist of what I've seen, is that most people running into this are putting them in actual computers hooked up to actual power supplies. Here's the crazy thing, though. I put 2 identical drives in a PC for the first time that I had shucked. Identical, same size, same. They were both Elements. They were bought at the same time. Like, could not be more identical other than the serial number. One of them worked and one of them didn't.
Yeah, that's the thing that everybody says.
I found people out there who were like, I had 3 identical drives bought at the same time, and 2 of them refused to spin up and 1 worked. So like, there's like no rhyme or reason to which hard drives are and are not going to spin up with this problem.
My understanding is that there are some sizes that are more likely to have the problem than other sizes, other capacities. So based on the drives that they're putting into those capacities, is my understanding.
It's a weird phenomenon, but like you said, it's primarily they're just trying to stop people from doing this, which is just getting cheap, big drives.
The good news is there's a pretty easy fix.
Well, sure. There are multiple solutions to this problem. The one I chose is, I think, the best one, but it required some very delicate work. All you have to do is prevent power from getting to that 3.3 volt pin. So there are multiple ways to do that. Here are the common solutions. You can put a little piece of tape over that pin.
Okay.
So I never bought Kapton tape before.
I use that for 3D printing because it's heat and thermally.
Okay.
Yeah.
You bought a big roll of it the last time we were at the electronics flea market, and I wasn't sure what your use case for a big roll of it was, but that explains it.
It's really good if you have something flat that you need to make electrically or thermally insulated.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
You can use other types of tape, it sounds like, but Kapton is the best under temperature and like for just being a long lasting solution. If you look at the pins on a SATA power connector, they are tiny.
Yeah. So pins on all connectors are tiny these days, it turns out.
So it took me half a dozen tries to cut exactly the right size tiny strip of tape and position it just right over that one pin, because you don't want to block the other pins next to it, of course, because those need power potentially.
So the thing I did when I had to cut the Kapton tape for a similar thing, but not the 3.3 volt problem, I needed to do it for an HDMI pin, and
those are even smaller.
I printed out the physical layout of the thing, and then put that down under a piece of glass and cut it on the glass with an X-Acto knife.
Okay, sure.
And that, or acrylic, I guess, probably, but that made it relatively easy because I was just I was like tracing at that point.
Yeah. I
then
did
I had
similar.
this tiny piece of tape that I had to manage with a pair of like needle nose scissors, and it was still hard. But
that was the hard. Well, both were hard. I did a similar thing. I used a box cutter and a ruler, and then like holding it in place and not having it curl up and getting it positioned on the pin was a challenge, but it worked on the first try.
2 pairs of tweezers turns out really helpful.
That's probably a good way to go. Another option I've seen out there, which I think is bad based on multiple anecdotal experiences, is a Molex adapter. If you still have in modular power supplies, you'll get cables that terminate in Molex connectors rather than
the
SATA.
old 4-pin red, yellow, black.
Right. So you can get a Molex to SATA adapter for those, and go Molex out of the power supply and then an adapter to SATA, and that will strip the 3.3 volt.
Okay.
But in theory, that should be just fine. But it sounds like it took me almost no time to find somebody posting photos of the fire that started in their computer from a crappy Molex adapter. Jeff mentioned to me that he tried this once and it killed the drive instantly. So maybe don't trust this electrical solution. It does not sound great.
I think the larger the larger answer there is maybe don't buy janky adapters. Buy your adapters from like reputable places, and also probably nobody reputable is making a Molex to SATA power at this point.
I would not go that route at all.
There was a period of time when like your motherboards came with Molex to SATA adapters. I'm sure those are fine. They're hard to find now, though.
Yeah, they're not that common. The final options are to get a little more destructive. You can cut and tape off the 3.3 volt line on the cable out of the power supply,
like the SATA power cable.
Yes, which the drive will work fine and it will fix this problem. The other one, which I considered doing because it sounds dead easy and hard to screw up, but it's destructive, is to just break the 3.3 volt pin off of the drive itself, off of the power connector. And apparently, I saw some pictures. You just take a box cutter and wedge it under the pin and bend it up and move it back and forth, and it'll break off in 10 seconds. And apparently that's just fine. I saw no end of people saying, I have had drives running for years like this, and it worked just fine. But
that always seemed really scary to me.
Yes, I agree. Like, I thought about doing it because I didn't have any other way to do it at the moment. And I was like, man, I really just want to get this done and installed and move on. But I resisted because that is a little too permanent for my taste. And so instead, I ordered some Captain Tape and waited for that for a day or two, and that was fine.
The Captain Tape is a useful thing to have around anyway, so it's worth having a roll of Captain. Like when we were at the electronics flea market, and I saw a guy selling rolls of, they were thin rolls, but they were rolls of Captain Tape for like $2.
Yeah,
I was all about that.
It's good to just have stuff around. Like we've talked about, like you can't buy like a tiny one little unit of anything anymore. You're going to buy 36 feet of Captain Tape or 800 nylon standoffs instead of the 4 you need or whatever. But also, like, speaking from recent experience, like it's kind of nice to just have a parts drawer of stuff, because having things when you need it is pretty awesome. So
it's pretty good. What do you put in the drives in, Brad?
So I like I said, I mostly put them in an enclosure for backups that I never actually do, but now I've started putting them in my actual server, which again, that's probably where you're going to run into the 3.3 volt issue. This has gotten me looking at external enclosures a little more closely, because as I have been doing some backups now, finally to this, I have this SYBA, SYBA, 4-bay. It's a 4-bay USB 3.0 enclosure. And the speeds I'm getting to this thing are like way slower than what 4 hard drives should be writing at one time. And that has gotten me, I guess this is a little aside for the end here, that's gotten me looking at USB transfer standards. Like data transfer standards. And apparently all enclosures are not created equal out there.
I'm not surprised.
Is what I have learned. So like a couple things to know about enclosures that I have read up on in recent days. And to be clear, we're not talking about your average like Synology or QNAP like NAS device.
You're not talking about something with a CPU, right? You're talking about something that shows up as an endpoint for storage.
Yes, so like stuff like you have that has compute and an operating system. That's an all-in-one thing. Like we're talking about dumb enclosures that are just meant to connect to an actual computer and just show up as like an external drive. So there are 2 standards there. There is USB 3.0 BOT, bulk only transport. So apparently. This is one of those things where everybody knows USB, but nobody thinks about what's going on under the level under USB or in the subcategory of how is the USB working. So bulk only transport apparently is like the data standard from the beginning of USB through USB 1 and 2.
Okay, so this is like what thumb drives and stuff use?
Yeah, an older, like about 15 years ago, external hard drives and stuff like that. So that standard has carried on to USB 3. We don't need to get too much into how the signaling protocol works, but it sounds like it's serial, where it's like it can only send one command at a time in a single queue. It's like, it's slow. And it turns out this Saiba I have is a bulk-only transport enclosure, which I didn't know to research when I bought it. So, kind of a bottleneck. It's nowhere near USB 3, like theoretical or even practical maximum speeds. This has led me to discovering something called UASP, USB Attached SCSI Protocol.
Oh, man.
Which is like 10 years old now from the looks of things.
You can get SCSI again?
Yeah. So this is basically SCSI over USB.
Oh, man. That's awesome.
Which, unlike BOT, it's a parallelized standard, so it can like send parallel commands without having to wait for one to finish, that kind of thing. It does like a lot more things in parallel over the link. And
can it address individual drives inside the cage?
That's something I forgot to mention. So either one can do that actually. So because you see a lot of people saying like, don't do RAID on an external enclosure because the USB controller always obfuscates what the drives are doing. But if you just look for JBOD, which anybody who's into RAID and storage is familiar.
You mean just a bunch of disks?
Yes, just a bunch of disks. Look for JBOD support on whatever enclosure you buy, and that means it will expose each drive as just a block device to the operating system, and then you're fine. So there don't seem to be that many UASP-enabled enclosures out there. Like you can find some, and they're not even that much more expensive. It just doesn't seem like it's that widely supported, which is kind of a bummer.
It seems like a really specialty use case because typically if you're doing USB storage, you probably don't care about perf too much.
Yeah. Well, the one place this matters is when you get like 4 bays and higher, because you can find like 6-8 bay hard drive enclosures out there now. Once you have that many drives in parallel, depending on what kind of RAID layout you're using, you might actually hit the limits of the USB speed. Like if you've got 4 or 6 hard drives in there all reading from a striped array, which means each drive is reading in parallel, you're getting effectively 4 times the speed of a single drive. And so the speed does matter if you're doing something like that. I mean, ultimately, this thing is going to be attached to a Raspberry Pi over the network. So I'm not going to hit these speeds anyway. But doing these initial backups from my NAS has been painfully slow.
Yeah.
When I know the drives in there could be going way faster if the USB wasn't a bottleneck.
Huh.
The UASP thing, in fairness, everything in your chain has to support it for it to work. So the enclosure has to support it. The USB controller on the computer you're hooking it up to has to support it. The operating system has to support it, which to be fair, every Windows since 8 has, like Linux has it. Every operating system has it now. But you need the hardware all the way through the chain as well to make it work.
So the drives have to support it too, or no?
No. The drives don't know about it or care about it. It's purely a USB thing.
And do all the modern USB controllers support it?
I would assume so. I didn't, since my thing doesn't support it, and I don't think I'm going to get one. I didn't bother researching, but I have to assume like every good USB controller on a motherboard that's part of a vendor chipset surely supports it by now because it is like 10 years old.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know this existed, so this is cool.
If I ever buy another enclosure, I will definitely be on the lookout for this feature. Although I'm just going to roll with this cheap one I've got because it's fine for a network backup.
The interesting thing is there's also like there was eSATA and stuff like that for a while, but all that kind of fell off.
Yes, in fact, most of the enclosures, including mine, have eSATA ports on them. But like, would you have to get an extra card? You'd have to get a card for that, right? You have to get an external, like a PCIe eSATA card.
No, you don't. You can just do a pass through, so you can run a SATA cable from one of the ports on your motherboard to a back panel, a back plate.
I'll have to look, but it has to be eSATA on both ends. It won't go to a regular SATA thing on the motherboard, right?
eSATA is just SATA.
Oh,
it's just a different connector that latches because it's external.
Oh man, I may have wished I looked at this before I started this big transfer. It came with an eSATA cable. I should look at what's on the other end of that cable and see what it would plug into. Or maybe you can get an adapter.
You can buy like a motherboard header adapter, like the kind of thing that you use to put extra USB ports from your USB motherboard headers. And slot that into an empty slot on the back of your case.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. eSATA, you're right though. Like eSATA is considered pretty much moribund at this point. So
yeah,
not a lot to do there unless you jump through the hoops. But anyway, that's kind of a little primer on stuff I've been doing with cheap hard drives and how to get a quick, cheap RAID together if you're inclined.
I'm glad you're living that Shuck life. The bad news is the time to buy drives is almost always Black Friday, but there's also usually another sale in the post-Christmas. Usually they also go on sale around New Year's post-Christmas.
Yeah. And again, Shuck Stop is the thing to check. Just, I don't know if they have notifications set up. I haven't looked, but keep an eye on that. Like load it once a day and just check if you're in the market for hard drives and hope to catch a good deal.
Yeah, the deal over time aspect of that is really, really nice.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good place as any to wrap up. I got a late breaking Swiftie announcement.
Oh,
yeah. My wife sent me a story this morning that Rogers, the cellular provider at BC Place where the show was, fans used over 11 terabytes of mobile data on December 8th, setting a new Canadian record for data usage during a single event. This broke the previous record of 7.4 terabytes set during her Toronto concert at Rogers Centre on November 21st. And they installed a 5G network for this show, basically. Yeah, equivalent to uploading 2,100 hours of video.
That's really interesting because 11 terabytes sounds enormous in a cellular data context. It sounds tiny from a number of people at a Taylor Swift show and outside the arena kind of context.
Yeah, right. They fully they boosted network capacity by 38 times. I will say shout out to Rogers because my cellular worked pretty much the entire time I was downtown, even with 180,000 extra people in town. So
yeah, that's the cell phone doesn't work at the trade show phenomenon seems to mostly have gone away, which is crazy because I thought that would just be a fact of life forever.
It seems like a problem that was solved with money. So,
sure. Most problems.
And let's see, this article also says that they set up a temporary mobile units outside the stadium for the crowds that were gathered around outside. Over 3 nights of performances, fans used 32 terabytes of data on Rogers 5G. That's I got 2 gigabytes from Verizon. They were like, you have 2 gigabytes while you're international. Don't use more than that.
Yikes.
Yeah.
No live streaming for you.
No live streaming for me. It's fine. I was enjoying the show. That'll do it for us this week. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a listener supported show. We wouldn't be here without you, the listener. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you indeed.
I'm excited you got into shucking, Brad. I didn't think you were gonna walk this path.
Like I said, I've been doing it for a while, but I had been doing it just as a backup solution, and now some of those are ending up in my main machine. So
there you go. As always, we're listener supported. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, it's patreon.com/techpod, where for $5 a month, you get access to the Discord, which is full of beautiful nerds talking about Taylor Swift in Canada. And I got a ton of Vancouver tips from people in the Discord.
That's awesome.
And a bunch of invitations to do lovely stuff. We weren't there for very long, so I didn't get to do a meetup or anything. But I would love to come back sometime because it was a lovely city, and I'd like to be able to spend more time. There was apparently on the north side of town at this light garden over a gorge where they had Christmas lights and had Swiftied it all up and hung like a friendship bracelet across the gorge on their suspension bridge. We didn't get a chance to go up there and do that, but that seemed like it was pretty dope too. So, again, patreon.com/techpod. It's $5 a month. As always, thank you to all of our listeners, but a very special thank you to our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Crow, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Fiend, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Yes, we appreciate you very much.
And that will do it for us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Tech Pod. Until then, I don't know, man, listen to some Taylor Swift or something.
Stay Swifty.
Yeah, stay Swifty. There you go. Bye, everybody.